So this is an idea I've had for quite some time that I've always kind of wanted to talk about here on the channel, just because, well, a lot of the villains here in JoJo's Bizarre Adventure are extremely powerful, and I've always kind of wanted to talk about them, especially the main villains of the franchise. And of course, kind of place them in order for people to enjoy and watch and me to discuss. As I have received a numerous amount of comments over the years of people asking me who's the strongest villain or what villain beats which villain, etc, etc. And in the past, I have given my more, thematic thoughts on these villains. I've never really given a more descriptive way on how to scale these villains, so I thought I might as well knock down two birds with one stone. And to go more in depth into how I'm thinking, or at least how I'm tiering this, is that I'm looking more at a in-character scale of them rather than, just the raw power scaling. Here's the raw stats, this is why they win. As a lot of these characters have some weird arguments to them, at least in my head, to where they are placed when speaking in character for them. On top of that, none of these villains are weak by any means. They are all top tier in this verse, regardless of where I place them on this list. Even the ones at the bottom can clap at least a majority of the villains and heroes in the franchise, so just FYI to everybody. So with all of that out of the way, let's actually get into the tier list. So starting off in D tier by himself is Part 1 Dio Brando. So I know it might be a bit controversial to have Dio this far down on the list for very many reasons, but once I kind of start, presenting the arguments for the other villains, you kind of see why. Part 1 is a very early part. It's Araki's first part. There really isn't a lot to really describe here in terms of actual statements and feats. While Dio has a lot of vampiric abilities he does show in Part 1, there's really nothing to really back up those hacks and abilities. While these hacks and abilities could work on lesser villains in the series, none of the main villains in the series would ultimately be affected by them. So if Dio were to use his hypnosis on, I don't know, Diavolo or Toru or Valentine, it wouldn't work just because they're just very strong-willed characters and wouldn't be controlled by Part 1 Dio. And while regeneration and his freezing technique are extremely powerful against lesser characters, a lot of these other main villains just outspeed him or would not get touched by Dio, as Part 1 Dio just doesn't have any really good AP or speed feats. While he does have one extremely good durability feat at the end of his fight with Jonathan on the boat, as he survived that steamboat blast, that's the only thing he really does have. Zeppeli also did state that Dio is 5 times stronger than him, and he does fight both Jonathan and him at the same time, leading to a multiplier very high when it comes to a human becoming a vampire. Dio can be 5 times stronger than a Hamon Master, or on a high ball just be 25 times stronger than both him and Jonathan at the same time. But even then, with those numbers, we don't know any really crazy stats with Zeppeli or Jonathan, so it's just like, what does that even mean? And even technically then, Jonathan eventually does surpass Dio, so it's just really weird. And I know some people are going to make the argument that technically you can say Part 3 Dio and Part 1 Dio are almost virtually the same, at least in terms of stats, at least during the later fight with Jotaro, but there are some stand shenanigans involved in that part, so you really can't say they're exactly the same character. So the only thing really holding Dio back from being placed any higher on this list is just his actual stats. That's really basically about it. His hacks are extremely powerful, don't get me wrong, but he just doesn't have anything to really back up those abilities. So moving on to C tier with our only character in that tier is Yoshikage Kira. While on the surface he does have a lot of abilities that are extremely powerful and a lot of good stats to back up those abilities, there's just a few character things that kind of, at least personally for me, place him this low on the list. Stats wise, with him and Killer Queen, he should be at least around Josuke Higashikata's Crazy Diamond's level, but he should be slightly weaker than Crazy Diamond just because if you read the ending of Part 4, or at least watched it, my man got literally boxed out by Josuke. GG Sakura, as Josuke should be at least relative to Jotaro Kujo, a stand user I have talked very frequently on this channel about and on others, who should be at a massively faster than light level plus, and should have AP ranging in large mountain level on a high ball to low level about small city. So Kira and Killer Queen should be roughly around that level, but at least a step or two down below these two characters, at least in terms of stats. The only questionable one here is his AP, as Killer Queen's first bomb completely destroys something, it turns into a bomb, even at a molecular level, so it's extremely powerful. And ability wise, Killer Queen does actually have a lot going for him. The first ability is to make anything a bomb, like I said previously, second being sheer heart attack, and third being bites the dust. Kira with his first ability, bomb transmutation, can make anything into a bomb, absolutely and completely destroying the opponent or object Kira has made into a bomb. And if you were to touch one of these bombs that Kira has made, you will actually just straight up die from the explosion if you touch it, regardless if the actual thing that was turned into a bomb is set off. The only drawback here is, of course, that Kira actually, with Killer Queen, has to make that motion with his hand, the click noise, to actually set the bomb off. And if stopped, the bomb will not go off. Entering Sheer Heart Attack now, it is an automatic stand that comes off of Killer Queen. It is arguably the second best automatic tracking stand in JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, tracking its opponents down by heat signature. So, greater the heat signature, the more likely Sheer Heart Attack will track that thing. This stand's explosion ability is so powerful it can even damage Jotaro Kujo pretty heavily and make him unconscious, making it arguably as strong as Dio from Part 3, just in terms of AP. And while it is stated to not have a weakness, it technically does, just make a greater source of heat to where it will just track that thing. Now entering Kira's last ability, Bites the Dust. By placing Killer Queen in the eye of one person, if that one person were to speak any of Kira's secrets, Killer Queen will automatically destroy them, resetting that day / timeline, making that person replay that day continuously over and over and over again in one giant loop / cycle. The only way to stop it is to, well, make Kira take back Killer Queen, as Kira is defenseless without Killer Queen, as it's now placed on somebody else. And Kira cannot automatically make it activate once it's placed on a person, as Killer Queen is now acting of its own will. So with all that being said, why is he only in C tier by himself? Well, if you read or watched part 4, you kind of realize he frankly sucks. My mans can't defend himself in the box for his life's sake. Like, he just frankly sucks at fighting. You would think with the ability to make anything a bomb, you would, start grabbing random objects around you and start chucking them at your opponent, but he doesn't do that. You would also think he would use Sheer Heart Attack a lot more, but he frankly stops using this. Note, I feel like this is on Araki's part, as Araki has this tendency to make extremely powerful abilities and just kind of throw them off to the side, so I'll blame that one on Araki's case here, but in character wise, he just doesn't use it anymore. And for the people that are going to argue for Bites the Dust only works in hyper specific cases involving non-stand users to reset the day. In an honest fight, Kira is defenseless and can't use this stand ability proper. Kira is built around the character of being sneaky / trying to avoid problems, so it totally makes sense why he'd be this low on the list, as he's not trying to fight people. That's not the point of his character. And even if I did really highball him and really did give him the benefit of the doubt, he'd only move up a single spot, but that's on a really good highball, and I frankly just don't believe it. So finally entering B tier, at the bottom of it is Diavolo. Now this is a very similar case to C tier's Dio Brando. So Diavolo has two abilities, Time Eraser / Time Skip and Epitaph. Time Skip allows Diavolo to skip over the next 10 seconds of predestined fate. All actions still occur in this time skip, but nobody remembers them because they have been skipped over. Epitaph is the ability to see 10 seconds into the future, meaning that Diavolo can precog his opponents. A bonus to all of this is within the time skip / time erasure, Diavolo is unaffected by everything, meaning that he can technically, if timed right, survive a blow. Furthermore, unlike Kira, Diavolo actually uses these two stand abilities extremely effectively. So effectively, in fact, during the events between parts 3 and 5, Diavolo had fought Silver Chariot's user Polnareff and actually completely destroyed him, leading to the final idea that Diavolo at least has to be faster than a stand like Silver Chariot, giving him massively faster than light plus speeds on a really good highball. The only reason why I'm not placing him any higher, like Dio from part 1 Phantom Blood, is that we just don't have a lot of stats or statements / feats with him in the realm of the physical sense. At bare minimum, you can only compare him to Silver Chariot, which, don't get me wrong, Polnareff is an extremely powerful stand user, but in terms of the other villains on this list and who they have fought, it's a lot different than Polnareff, I'll damn tell you that. Even if I were to highball it and make Diavolo stats the same as, I don't know, Anubis Polnareff, that's barely entering the realms of Star Platinum levels of power, which I can also say this, everybody above this spot is at Star Platinum's level, or if not higher. To be honest, I don't really think this is a controversial take, as this is pretty consistent with me with Diavolo here on the channel. I would genuinely like to place him higher if he had better stats, but Epitaph and his time skip are really carrying him this far into the list. Unlike Kira, he knows how to actually use his stand ability pretty effectively. So coming into the middle of B tier is Awakened Dio. Unlike Part 1 Phantom Blood Dio, Part 3 Dio is a complete monster. If taken very literal, Dio states after sucking the blood of Joseph Joestar, this is his greatest high he has ever felt in his entire existence, implying the fact that his current vampiric abilities are much greater than they ever were before. And for the people that are going to argue, but no, they can't be for X, Y, and Z reason, Dio's goals and character aspirations in Part 3 are to achieve a stand that can accelerate time. Thank you to Part 6. Dio, at least in character, views the vampiric abilities he has now as more of a bonus, as now kind of the stand potential and stand power he has now is kind of the focus of his existence. So that's why we potentially don't see him using any of the other abilities other than regeneration. At bare minimum, we do have to assume that he just gets overall stronger during this ending fight in Part 3. During the beginning of that fight, one can assume that Dio is slightly stronger than Star Platinum and Jotaro Kujo. And then when he eventually gets this new high / this awakened form, Dio and the world are definitely stronger than Jotaro Kujo before his Rage Amp. So it's not too wild to say that Dio is in the massively faster than light plus category, even greater than Jotaro Kujo before a Rage Amp, and AP being somewhere in large mountain level plus. On top of all of that, Dio has the ability to stop time, at least in his awakened form, for 9 seconds, and potentially can continuously actually make that timer go up in stop time, verbatimly stated by Araki himself in a couple interviews. Dio, and especially Awakened Dio, is extremely powerful. Quite literally, the only thing holding him back is himself. Due to his brash and arrogant nature, he can get a little bit cocky with his ability, and if somebody were to invade his stop time, he kind of starts, sweating a little bit. But if none of that actually happens, I can confidently say that he's probably going to bully at least everybody in JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, unless, we get to the more extreme and more powerful stands in the series. Personally, for me, he's in my top 10. So moving to the top of B tier, we have Ultimate Cars as the final gatekeep to the strongest characters in the series. Keyword there, gatekeep, for a specific reason. You see, Ultimate Lifeform Cars is, well, it's in the name, the ultimate life form. Stated in Part 2, he has all powers of all living creatures on Earth. That roughly adequates to about 8.5 million creatures he has the powers to use in his arsenal. On top of that, all these animals' hacks are at their peak because Ultimate Cars is the ultimate life form, so they all have to be at their peak of power. So it's crazy. This Ultimate Cars, just ability alone wise, is ridiculously busted. And even stat wise, he is not technically even lacking by no means. How the argument should go is the following. The food chain shown in Part 2 goes as the following: humans, vampires, pillarmen. Pillarmen eat all life forms on the planet. This food chain can technically be seen as a rudimentary scale in JoJo's Bizarre Adventure for power scaling a little bit. If taken very literally, Pillarman Cars, not Ultimate Lifeform Cars, stat-wise should rank above Part 1 Dio. And he does show a few instances of having faster than light speeds, dodging light in Part 2. So that's just an argument for Pillarman Cars. So what happens when you give him the Ultimate Lifeform buff? So the argument becomes this: Ultimate Lifeform Cars should be able to match any character, in this example Part 3 Dio, in stats because he's the ultimate lifeform, regardless of stand shenanigans. Dio's greatest highs, Cars should be able to match them, if not just surpass them. As in Part 2, it stated that Pillarmen just are naturally stronger than vampires, so the ultimate lifeform in this example should be above even that. So basically, give Ultimate Cars all of Dio's stats, but just put a plus next to them, and there you go. But there is a bit of a loophole, and that is stand shenanigans. And technically, stands are of alien origin, but they did adapt here on Earth. So it's like really weird on how you see it. Cars could theoretically match anybody with a stand in terms of physical stats, but stand users could just straight up not be natural to Earth's environment, leading to the idea that Cars possibly couldn't match a stand user in terms of abilities and stats, meaning that the example I just literally used wouldn't work. But it's technically going off the idea of just pure vampiric ability and not stand stats. And if you do think like that, there's still technically the argument that, well, the guy is literally super immortal and would literally require a one-shot or just a very powerful ability to beat him in general general because, you know, 8 million different hack abilities he can use at literally once if you wanted to. So that's still the reason why I still place him in B tier, at least in high B tier. Kars is really, really powerful no matter what way you look at him. Quite literally the gatekeeper to the strongest characters in the series. So for context, all these characters above Ultimate Kars, in stats and ability wise, should be able to beat him. On top of that, either come from a different universe where nature might be a bit different, / some stand shenanigans might be involved, so they might not be 100% human / natural to Earth's environment. So he shouldn't be able to copy them. So starting off with low A tier, we have Made in Heaven Pucci. Surprisingly enough, out of all the characters on this list, this is the most easiest one to explain. So basically, the reason why Pucci is this far up on the list is, well, infinite to immeasurable speed hacks. It quite literally states in the Part 6 manga stand stat guide that he literally has infinite speed / his speed is able to rival that of God. I don't know what else to explain to you to prove this point. He's pretty fucking fast. And how Pucci's speed would work would technically classify him under immeasurable speed here in the power scaling community. Surprisingly, his most interesting stat here would actually be his AP due to the argument behind it. Looking back at the Part 3 fight between Jotaro and Dio, Star Platinum and the world should be at least relatively the same in terms of stats, meaning that Jotaro can at least endure mountain level plus attacks from Dio and the world, meaning that his durability is much higher than his AP. And with an argument I say pretty consistently on other people's channels and mine, where Jotaro's stat wise with Star Platinum should be at least relatively the same throughout all the parts, means that technically Part 6 Jotaro and Part 3 Jotaro shouldn't be all that too different, just, you know, time stop is the only really major difference here. Therefore, meaning that technically Made in Heaven Pucci would have to have AP even greater than Star Platinum's or the world's to actually one-shot Jotaro Kujo. So basically, Pucci just has raw stats on his side. He basically speed blitzes everybody on this list except for like 2. And that's mainly because, you know, he gets out-hacked, because speed's one thing, but like there are some really busted abilities coming up here. So at the top of A tier is Funny Valentine and D4C Love Train. If Pucci is just raw stats and speed, Funny Valentine is literally just stand hacks and turtling your opponent to defeat. The main gimmick of D4C Love Train is the light barrier. The light barrier has the ability to redirect misfortune. Usually misfortune in this scenario is attacks. This misfortune will literally be shot across time and space, affecting another person, probably most likely killing them. The light barrier is basically undefeatable, as it takes an infinite amount of energy, in this case attack energy, not speed energy, Pucci, I'm looking at you, to actually overcome this light barrier. Technically, as long as Funny Valentine is in between the light barrier, he is basically unkillable, as misfortune will be redirected towards somebody in some different time and place, or nearby. But oh brother, does it get worse. Technically, he has infinite lives and an extremely powerful one-shot ability. Also, he can spawn more of himself. Enter D4C's basic abilities. So before getting the corpse parts and evolving his stand, Funny Valentine had access to Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap, for short D4C. When Funny Valentine is placed in between 2 objects that fold in on themselves, he's able to enter parallel worlds. Thanks to this ability, Funny Valentine can bring more Funny Valentines into his world. Note, these Funny Valentines are just regular people, but having more of yourself is still a really good thing. In a worst case scenario, if Funny Valentine were to die, he can actually transfer D4C over to another Funny Valentine, basically making himself immortal. But there is more. If Funny Valentine were to bring another version of yourself and make you collide with that version of yourself, you will literally instantly explode, because 2 molecules cannot exist in the same place at the exact same time. The only exception to this rule is Funny Valentine. So add all of those abilities to Love Train and you basically see where I'm getting at here. Valentine is basically unkillable. He has an immovable ability, he's basically immortal, he has the ability to one-shot you if he so chooses, and he has the ability to bring more of himself to fight you. The man is busted as shit. I don't really know how to more basically explain it. Valentine is a monster of a threat. He could technically fight everybody below him and probably win at the exact same time, not even joking. The only thing Funny Valentine surprisingly here is lacking is stats. Part 7 and 8 really don't like to describe things very often for the viewers in terms of powers, but since Tusk Act 4 was able to react to light and literally hold it, some people assume that this would vice versa go with Funny Valentine and D4C, meaning that at bare minimum they would have at least faster than light speeds at a really gracious highball, depending on how you scale Tusk Act 4 versus the world and how you see the world, at least in this alternate universe, and depending on how you see that fight go down, Funny Valentine might, and this is kind of a really big might here, have massively faster than light plus speeds, but regardless of stats and power, hacks-wise, D4C Love Train is literally bodying everybody just because how broken Love Train is. And on top of that, some guidebook statements even describe Funny Valentine and his abilities to be trans-dimensional, so take that as you will. For a very long time, a lot of people considered Funny Valentine to be the strongest villain because of all these abilities and all these statements. But of course, times change and you get crazier and crazier shit in JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. So my previous statement that D4C Love Train and Funny Valentine would body everybody is technically wrong, as in a world in post-8 JoJolian, Toru and Wonderview are a thing. Coming in at the only spot in S tier and being the strongest villain in the franchise, Toru and Wonderview. Toru's stand ability goes as the following. If anybody were to wanting to find out the identity of him / his head doctor persona, Wonderview will activate, causing calamities to knock into you. Depending on how hard you pursue Toru, you will either get a brutally damaged body and or instantly fucking die, as all calamity that comes knocking into you for whatever reason is extremely powerful. Example, knocking into a couple tables will literally sever your legs off your body. Another example is literal raindrops literally cutting through your body like butter. The reason why it's so powerful is Wonderview controls logic, which it's able to infect calamity on top of that, affecting you and everything you try to do to pursue the head doctor / Toru. It's able to control logic so much it's able to affect all of society on a planetary scale and even a timeline scale. Do you know why Mamazuku died at the end of part 8? It's because Jesus Christ literally moved west. If it wasn't for that action, Steel Ball Run wouldn't have occurred, Johnny wouldn't have gone to Japan, and the events of part 8 JoJolian wouldn't have gone down the way they did if it wasn't for logic and calamity playing a part in society being manipulated by Toru and Wonderview. Note, it's only logic and calamity it's manipulating in society, not all of fate, but at least a small portion of things' fates. This is the quick summary on how this ability works, as it's far more complicated and would take at least 15 minutes to explain at bare minimum to really grasp what it actually truly does. I have made previous videos on this. If you're a new fan watching this, please go watch those other videos. They are extremely helpful and helped a lot of people out. Thankfully, Araki does give a kind of quick TLDR guide to this entire video and thinks that Calamity is the strongest thing in the series. Guess what Calamity is? Wonderview. Wonderview is literally Calamity energy. For people that doubt that, here is literally the ending panel of JoJolian of Wonderview literally being let loose because Toru is dead now. Also, by the way, if Toru dies, Wonderview just kind of roams free to do whatever it wants calamity-wise. It's basically unkillable too if you don't have Soft and Wit Go Beyond. On top of that, Toru can't actually be hurt at all, as everything follows under logic that Wonderview can manipulate, so nothing can actually hurt him. So he's untouchable and can destroy you in one shot if you try to pursue him hard enough, which is pretty insane. So basically, this stand can defeat everybody on this list probably at once. Imagine the most goofy scenario. Yeah, it probably wins. I don't know, like D4C Love Train, in between the light barrier, Funny Valentine steps on a pebble, he breaks his back. I'm not joking, that literally possibly could happen because Calamity's weird and Wonderview is able to manipulate logic. I'm not joking that a literal pebble can defeat everybody on this list. That's how busted this character is. And for the people that want stats, literally grab the greatest stats from literally the strongest villains in the series and just apply them to Toru. And there you go. So basically, infinite to immeasurable speed plus, and AP somewhere in the range of high mountain level plus. Technically, that could be way higher, but we're just going to keep it at that for right now. So here are my final thoughts on the placement of these characters. Do I think this is 100% accurate? Kind of. While I did think about it for a very long time, there could be spots where you can be like, well, isn't there some mixing and matching and like better hacks this character has over this character? Maybe you can possibly swap out maybe Kira for Diavolo or maybe like Pucci for Cars, but to be honest, I think they're so minor that they wouldn't really need to be changed. And I think everybody's at least tiered correctly. And for a definite fact, thanks to the volume 27 statement, Toru should literally be at the top of everybody's list. If he's not, that person is on some serious copium. No, this is just my opinion, and if you think there is some changes to be made, go ahead. I don't really care. It's the internet, and everybody has their opinions. Well, if you did enjoy the video, like, comment, share, subscribe, follow me on Twitter, stay hydrated. See you in the next one, ladies and gentlemen.